King Charles's visit to Cambridge Central Mosque should have been a straightforward royal engagement. A monarch visiting a well-known place of worship, meeting community leaders, praising sustainable architecture, and speaking in the familiar language of interfaith harmony. That is the version of the story most mainstream coverage preferred. It was presented as a gentle, inclusive moment, centered on Britain's religious diversity and the mosque's reputation as Europe's first eco-friendly mosque. But for critics of the king, the visit raised a far larger question. When a monarch lends the prestige of the crown to an institution, has the palace done enough due diligence on the history, funding, symbolism, and political associations around that institution? That is the issue at the heart of this debate. It is not simply whether the king may visit a mosque. Queen Elizabeth II visited an Islamic centre in Scunthorpe during her Golden Jubilee in 2002, and her wider record included respectful engagement with many faith communities. The question being asked now is different.
No single media outlet in the mainstream media is asking who built the mosque that King Charles went to 5 days ago. No one's asking where the funds have come from and why potentially this could be a massive, massive issue. Plus, we are also getting down to Prince William being in danger, the crown being in danger. And
it is whether this specific visit to this specific mosque with this specific funding background was treated with the seriousness it deserved. On the 20th of July 2026, King Charles visited Cambridge Central Mosque during a wider day of engagements in Cambridge. The mosque itself described the visit as a welcome royal moment, and public-facing coverage emphasized its architecture, its environmental design, and its role in local community life. The building is architecturally impressive. It was designed by Marks Barfield Architects, and its public identity has always leaned heavily into sustainability. Solar panels, heat pumps, rainwater harvesting, natural ventilation, and a forest-like interior that blends Islamic design with English materials and environmental themes. On that level, the visit made obvious sense for Charles. He has spent decades speaking about conservation, faith, tradition, and the relationship between humanity and the natural world. A purpose-built eco-mosque in Cambridge fits many of those interests at once. But the criticism begins when one moves from the building's architecture to the building's funding. Cambridge Central Mosque's own FAQ states that the project was funded by more than 10,000 private and public donations, both local and international. It also says the main donor was a consortium of government agencies in the Republic of Turkey, together with the Turkish private company Yapı Merkezi and the Qatar National Fund. That matters because royal visits are never ordinary photo opportunities. A visit from the king is not the same as a local councillor cutting a ribbon or a community group touring a building. When the monarch appears, the appearance becomes a national signal. It tells the country that this is a place, project, or institution worthy of royal recognition. So, critics argue that the palace should not simply ask whether a building is attractive, active, and locally important. It should also ask what associations are carried by the money, the opening ceremony, and the wider political context. The mosque officially opened to the public in April 2019, and its formal opening ceremony was held in December 2019. That ceremony included Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, as a keynote participant, alongside figures connected to the mosque and to Diyanet, Turkey's Directorate of Religious Affairs. None of that is hidden.
Palace didn't do their due diligence on this mosque, or they did do their due diligence on this mosque. Everything is signed off. Now, we'll rule out any of the royal correspondents or journalists asking any question any of us wants to know.
It is public information, available through the mosque's own materials and Turkish official coverage. The mosque also says it is independent of political direction, takes no position on political issues, and gives non-political sermons. That statement should be included, because accuracy matters. The criticism is not that the Cambridge congregation has been shown to be politically affiliated. The criticism is that a building largely supported by Turkish state-linked donors and opened with Erdogan's participation carries a diplomatic and symbolic context that should have been considered before the king praised it on the world stage. There is another detail in the mosque's own FAQ that makes the issue more nuanced. It says the Cambridge Mosque Trust is independent in its policies, while also noting that a minority of trustees are nominated by the Turkish Directorate of Religious Affairs. That does not prove improper influence, and it should not be presented as though it does. Many charities, religious bodies, universities, and cultural institutions have complex donor and governance histories. But complexity is exactly why the royal household has to be careful. The Crown does not only deal in legal facts, it deals in perception, symbolism, and trust. If a minority governance connection exists alongside a major funding connection, then the palace should have a clear answer for why a royal visit was appropriate and how officials assessed the optics. The issue is made more sensitive by the way the visit was described internationally. Turkish state-linked and Turkish media coverage understandably emphasized Turkey's role in the mosque's creation. Some reports framed the building as Turkish-backed and highlighted the presence of Turkish diplomatic representatives during the king's visit. That matters because a British royal engagement can be interpreted differently by different audiences. In Cambridge, it may look like a local community visit. In Ankara, it may look like recognition of a Turkish-supported religious and cultural project in Britain. In the British press, it may be softened into an eco-design story. In the online world, it becomes a question about foreign influence and royal judgment. One event can carry all of those meanings at once. This is where Erdogan's own record enters the conversation. Erdogan has repeatedly taken positions on Hamas that are sharply at odds with the United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union, all of which designate Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Let's go very, very carefully through this. This wasn't entirely government money. There were UK-based donations, but the majority, the controlling share, came from Turkish state agencies. That is not me rounding it up for effect. That's their own published funding breakdown. In
2011, he said in an interview that he did not see Hamas as a terror organization and described it as a political party and resistance movement. After the October 7 attacks and the war in Gaza, he again publicly rejected the terrorist label, calling Hamas a liberation group in remarks reported by Reuters and other outlets. In April 2024, Erdogan received Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh in Istanbul, a meeting confirmed by Turkey's own Directorate of Communications. These facts do not automatically make Cambridge Central Mosque responsible for Erdogan's foreign policy. But they do explain why critics ask whether Buckingham Palace understood the optics of a royal endorsement of a building whose major funding and opening ceremony were tied to the Turkish state under Erdogan. The concern becomes sharper because Cambridge Central Mosque was not visited by the king as part of a formal diplomatic mission to Turkey. It was not a state visit in which the monarch was acting on government advice in a foreign policy context with unavoidable diplomatic protocol. It was a domestic royal engagement in Cambridge. That distinction matters. If the king is acting as a national figure inside Britain, then the palace has more room to choose where he goes and what his presence communicates. Critics therefore ask whether the palace treated the engagement as a harmless interfaith visit and failed to anticipate the funding question, or whether officials knew the background and decided that the symbolism was acceptable. Neither option is particularly reassuring to those who already worry that the king's personal interests are beginning to blur with the constitutional role of the crown. Due diligence is the phrase that keeps returning, because royal engagements are normally controlled with extraordinary care. Palace teams know who will be present, where the cameras will stand, what route the car will take, what local leaders will say, which photographs will be released, and how the event will be framed afterward. The royal household is not casual about these things. Security, services and palace staff exist partly to prevent the monarch from being drawn into avoidable controversy. That is why critics find it difficult to believe that the mosque's funding and opening ceremony slipped through the net. If a private individual can find the information quickly, then surely the palace could find it as well. And if the palace did find it, the next question is why it did not see the possible issue. This is not a demand for perfection. No palace office can predict every reaction to every engagement. But the standard is higher when the monarch is involved, because the monarch cannot easily explain, apologize, or argue his position afterward like an elected politician. Once the king appears, the image is created. Once the speech is delivered, the clip travels. Once the building is praised, the endorsement has already done its work. That is why prevention matters so much. A prime minister can be questioned in parliament. A minister can be interviewed. A party spokesman can be sent out to clarify. The monarch is not supposed to be dragged into that kind of political dispute, which means the household has to avoid placing him in situations that invite it. In this case, critics believe the risk was obvious enough to require more caution. The mosque was already famous for its eco-credentials, which made it attractive to Charles, but it was also publicly connected to Turkish state-linked funding and Erdogan's attendance at the opening ceremony. The palace could have chosen a different type of interfaith engagement, or a different Muslim community event, or a format that emphasized local British worshippers without elevating the building as an institution.
Today, at I hope a not too inconvenient time, and I may say so, I'm so impressed by the quality of the design and all the care and attention which has been lavished on it. The fact that you have a purpose-built mosque here with the community centre attached makes a huge contribution, I'm sure, not only to the community here, but to Cambridge itself. So I do congratulate you, and I pray with all my heart that it will continue.
Instead, the king went to the mosque itself, toured it, met leaders there, and praised its contribution. That is why the symbolism is difficult to separate from the funding history. The mainstream coverage of the visit largely avoided those questions. Much of it focused on the mosque's environmental credentials, its award-winning design, and the king's interest in community cohesion. Some lighter coverage even leaned into details such as clothing and atmosphere. There is nothing wrong with reporting those elements, but critics argue that journalism should not stop there. A royal visit is a public act. The king's words and presence carry institutional weight. If a building has a complicated international funding background, and if one of the major political figures attached to its opening has controversial associations and statements, then the public is entitled to know that context. Asking those questions is not the same as attacking ordinary worshippers or demonizing a faith community. It is asking whether the crown is being used carefully. That distinction is important because the debate can easily become heated. There is a legitimate difference between respectful engagement with British Muslims and uncritical royal association with foreign state influence. The first is part of being head of state in a pluralistic country. The second raises questions about sovereignty, soft power, and institutional judgment. Cambridge Central Mosque serves local Muslims and describes itself as independent and non-political. It also has a real architectural and environmental story. But royal patronage, or royal praise, can have consequences beyond local community relations. When the king praises a place as making a huge contribution to Cambridge, that compliment may be intended as politeness, but it also becomes a public validation. Critics argue that the palace should have understood that validation would be read not only by the local community, but also by international actors who helped bring the project into being. The comparison with Queen Elizabeth II is central to the original argument because the late Queen is often remembered as a monarch who balanced religious conviction with public duty. She was defender of the faith and supreme governor of the Church of England, and she spoke openly about her Christian faith in her Christmas broadcasts and other public messages.
Did the palace research this, or did this just miraculously slip through the net? Because the Turkish president has hosted senior Hamas leadership in Turkey. And on the Brotherhood, he's described it as, in his words, because it's always so important to be accurate, not an armed group, but an ideological organisation. He rejected the idea that it should be treated as any kind of threat at all. Now, I'm not going to sit here.
At the same time, she recognised and welcomed people of other faiths across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. During her Golden Jubilee, she visited the Scunthorpe Islamic Centre, a Hindu temple, a Jewish museum, and a Sikh Gurdwara. The royal family's own material describes her as someone who respected other faiths while remaining personally and constitutionally rooted in Christianity. That balance is what many critics now believe Charles has failed to maintain. The Scunthorpe example is useful because it undermines a lazy version of the argument. The issue is not that a monarch must never enter a mosque. Elizabeth II did exactly that in 2002. The Guardian reported at the time that the visit was a significant moment after the local Islamic centre had faced hostility following the September 11 attacks. The visit was part of a broader Jubilee effort to acknowledge religious and cultural diversity within Britain. For many people, that was a generous and stabilising act by the Queen. The difference critics point to is that the Scunthorpe Centre was presented as a local British Muslim institution, while the Cambridge Mosque's own FAQ acknowledges a major international funding structure involving Turkish state agencies and Qatar-linked support. To critics, that makes the two visits symbolically different. King Charles has long spoken of being a defender not only of one faith, but of faith more broadly. That phrase has followed him for decades and has often been interpreted as a sign of his interfaith instincts. Supporters see this as enlightened and necessary in modern Britain. They argue that the monarch must serve all citizens, not only Christians, and that a country with many communities needs a king who can meet people across religious lines. That is a serious argument, and it should not be dismissed. Britain is not a society in which the crown can pretend only one community exists. The monarch's pastoral role as a national figure inevitably includes visits to mosques, temples, synagogues, gurdwaras, churches, charities, schools, and community centres. But the phrase also carries a danger. If defender of faith is heard as a broad personal philosophy, it may sound generous. If it is heard as a replacement for defender of the faith,
that the Cambridge Mosque is bad. I am not implying that. They claim and they state on the record that they are not politically affiliated, and I will take their word for that. That is what is listed on their website. What I am saying is that Buckingham Palace are intelligence services. They work around the clock to keep King Charles safe. He doesn't so much as sneeze without it being approved, does he?
it becomes constitutionally charged. The coronation service did not make Charles a free-floating spiritual ambassador. It placed him inside a specific legal and religious tradition, even while modern Britain remains multi-faith and plural. That tension can be managed, but it cannot be pretended away. The king can show respect to all faiths, while still understanding that his own office is not religiously neutral in the way a purely secular presidency might be. This is why critics are so alert to patterns. One mosque visit might be explained as community outreach. One Ramadan message might be explained as goodwill. One interfaith gathering might be explained as national unity. But when those moments accumulate alongside long-standing comments from Charles about faith, foreign donations, controversies, and high-profile visits connected to international religious influence, critics begin to see not isolated gestures, but a direction of travel. They worry that the king is not merely recognizing Britain's diversity, but reshaping the public meaning of the crown around his own spiritual and environmental priorities. But critics counter that the coronation oath and the monarch's relationship with the Church of England are not decorative details. They are part of the constitutional architecture. The king is not simply a national celebrity with personal interests. He is a symbol of continuity, law, and institutional restraint. When he appears to elevate his own long-standing interfaith and environmental priorities above the traditional boundaries of his office, critics worry that he is using the crown to advance a personal worldview. That was the argument made by Dr. Gavin Ashenden, a former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, in the material referenced by the original transcript. He contrasted Elizabeth II's sense of duty with Charles's perceived willingness to reshape the system around his own beliefs. Whether one agrees with that critique or not, it captures a growing unease among some monarchists that Charles may be personally sincere, but constitutionally careless. The question then becomes what Prince William inherits. If public trust in the monarchy is weakened during Charles's reign, William will not begin with a blank slate. He will inherit the consequences of every decision, every perceived overreach, every controversy, and every unresolved tension. William is already operating under pressure. A fractured relationship with Prince Harry, Catherine's recent health challenges, public fatigue with royal drama, changing national identity, and a younger generation less emotionally attached to monarchy than their grandparents were. If the crown is also seen as drifting away from its constitutional Christian foundations or becoming entangled in politically sensitive interfaith symbolism, William's future task becomes even harder. Some commentators argue that William's strength is that he appears more restrained, more grounded, and more careful than his father in certain areas. He has shown an instinct for visible but measured public service, supporting farmers, speaking about homelessness, backing mental health projects, and allowing aides to clarify aspects of his own faith when needed. He is not yet king, and therefore he cannot simply correct or override his father's choices. But his eventual reign may be judged partly by whether he can restore clarity. That does not mean hostility toward other faiths. It means understanding that respect for all communities does not require the crown to ignore political funding, international influence, or the distinctive place of Christianity in the British Constitution. William's position is made harder because he has to prepare for the throne while appearing loyal to the king. He cannot publicly distance himself from every decision his father makes. He cannot issue parallel royal doctrine. He cannot become the voice of opposition within the family without causing a constitutional crisis of his own. So his strategy, if he is concerned, must be quieter, choosing his own patronages carefully, strengthening his relationship with communities that feel unheard, and signaling through action that his eventual reign will be disciplined. That may be why even small gestures from William receive such attention. People are looking for clues about the future because they are uneasy about the present. The risk is that by the time William becomes king, the debate may already have hardened. Once monarchists begin to feel that the institution no longer protects the things they thought it protected, loyalty becomes conditional. People who once defended the crown instinctively start asking whether it still represents them. That is not a small shift. The monarchy survives because enough people accept its symbolism, even when they disagree with individual royals. If the symbolism itself becomes unclear, the institution becomes more vulnerable.
No amount of threats will stop me bringing this to you. I am far from over in bringing you this story. When I tell you we have not even scratched the surface on this story alone, trust me, we could go for weeks and weeks. We're just getting going. But are the palace totally inept? Overrun? No clue that this happened? Or are they fully aware? That's the question on this.
That is why the Cambridge visit has been interpreted by some critics as part of a much larger warning sign. The Bishop Kai material in the original transcript reflects the most urgent version of that warning. He argued that those who still pray for the king and want to defend the monarchy are reaching a breaking point because they believe Charles is failing in his duty as defender of the faith. He called on William to listen to people who are worried about the spiritual and constitutional direction of the country. The language in that interview was extremely forceful, and not all of it can or should be adopted as neutral narration. But the underlying point was clear. For some Christian commentators, this is not an abstract debate about ceremony. They believe the monarchy's spiritual foundation is being weakened in real time, and they see William as the last major chance to correct the course. That is a dramatic claim, but it speaks to a real anxiety about institutional drift. When people say Britain is constitutionally Christian, they are not merely making a cultural statement. They are referring to coronation oaths, established churches, parliamentary prayers, royal titles, law, ceremony, and centuries of inherited settlement. The modern state also protects religious freedom and includes millions of citizens of other faiths and none. Holding those facts together requires discipline. The crown must be welcoming without becoming politically naive. It must be respectful without becoming performative. It must be inclusive without erasing the structure it is sworn to uphold. Critics of Charles's Cambridge visit argue that this discipline is exactly what now seems missing. The debate is also shaped by a broader mistrust of the palace and the mainstream royal press. In the original commentary, the presenter argued that royal correspondents too often repeat palace briefings without asking harder questions. That frustration is not limited to this mosque story. It also connects to questions around the Highgrove meeting between King Charles, Prince Harry, Meghan, and Queen Camilla, where the public was told the meeting was private, while various details still appeared through briefings and reporting. The complaint is not that the public deserves a transcript of a family conversation. It does not. The complaint is that the palace sometimes wants the benefits of publicity and privacy. At the same time, it wants to shape the story while refusing scrutiny of the story it has helped create. This is why transparency became another major theme. If a meeting is truly private, let it be private. If the palace briefs that it happened, then the public is allowed to ask how, why, and with what implications. If old footage or suggestive reporting is used to create an impression, people are allowed to ask whether they are being managed. The same principle applies to the Cambridge mosque visit. If the palace presents the event as a warm, simple community engagement, the public is still allowed to ask about the funding, the opening ceremony, and the political context. Transparency does not mean exposing every private royal conversation. It means not treating the public like children whenever uncomfortable facts are raised. This matters because the old royal communications model is breaking down. For decades, the palace could rely on a small group of correspondents, broadcasters, and newspapers to carry the official atmosphere of an engagement. That world still exists, but it no longer controls the whole conversation. Independent commentators can search documents, compare public statements, archive footage, and raise uncomfortable questions within hours. Sometimes they overreach, sometimes they speculate too much. But they also fill a gap left by soft coverage that refuses to follow obvious trails. When mainstream outlets cover the socks, the smiles, and the sustainability features, but not the funding page, they create the conditions for distrust. The palace should understand this by now. Silence no longer kills a story. Often, silence feeds it. If there is a clear explanation for why the king visited Cambridge Central Mosque despite its funding background, then officials would do better to explain the reasoning than to pretend the question does not exist. Perhaps the palace believes the mosque's independence statement, local role, and community work outweighed the concerns. Perhaps it believes the Turkish and Qatari funding history is old news and not relevant to the current congregation. Perhaps it considered the visit a gesture to British Muslims during a tense social climate. Those are arguments that can be made, but when they are not made, critics fill the space themselves. There is also a trust problem created by past royal scandals.
And there's a reason for that, because when the late Queen went to a mosque in 2002 in Scunthorpe, and she was the first reigning monarch to do so, this was a mosque that was built by local Muslim funds. It wasn't funded, like the one in Cambridge that King Charles has gone to, by money from the Turkish government, by the Qatar Royal Fund. So this is the problem. The timeline, the evidence clearly shows that for decades and decades, King Charles...
Critics point to the proximity of figures such as Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell to royal circles as examples of how palace judgment and vetting have failed before. Those examples are not the same as the Cambridge mosque visit, and they should not be casually collapsed into one accusation. But they explain why some people no longer accept the phrase, "the palace must have checked," as reassurance. The palace has made grave errors of association in the past. The fact that something appears on the royal diary does not automatically prove it was wise. At the same time, responsible commentary must avoid unfair leaps. A building funded in part by foreign donors is not automatically suspect. A mosque opened by a controversial foreign leader is not automatically responsible for everything that leader has said. British Muslims attending prayers in Cambridge should not be treated as political actors because of international funding decisions made years earlier. The mosque's own statement of non-political independence matters. The fair question is narrower and more institutional. Did the palace properly weigh how this engagement would look, given Erdogan's record, Turkish state-linked support, and the king's constitutional role? That is a serious question. It does not require attacking worshippers or treating a faith community as the enemy. This is the line a credible script has to hold. The issue is not ordinary Muslims. It is not whether Britain should allow mosques. It is not whether the king can meet people of different faiths. The issue is whether the symbolic power of the crown is being used with enough caution. In an age when foreign states use culture, religion, philanthropy, education, and architecture as forms of soft power, royal appearances must be examined carefully. A monarch's visit can be used in brochures, diplomatic messaging, domestic politics, and international reputation building. That does not mean every visit is sinister. It means every visit has consequences. The Turkish angle is therefore not a side issue. Turkey is a NATO member and an important diplomatic actor. But Erdogan's government has also taken positions that create serious concern among Western allies, especially around Hamas and broader Islamist movements. A 2026 memo from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies argued that Turkey under Erdogan has become a base for Muslim Brotherhood-linked activity.
Elizabeth II and Charles III are exercising their responsibilities. Queen Elizabeth was much loved and greatly respected because she was a woman of principle who put herself second to her responsibilities. That's a degree of moral alertness and commitment that people immediately recognize and admire when they see it. She sacrificed herself for what she and we believed in. King Charles has decided to use the system and sacrifice the system to what he believes in. And that's the difference.
Though that is one think tank's analysis and should be treated as such. The point for this story is not to turn a policy memo into a verdict on a Cambridge congregation. The point is that the palace had access to a public debate about Turkey's direction and should have anticipated that a Turkish-backed mosque visit by the king would be interpreted through that debate. The same applies to Qatar. The mosque FAQ names the Qatar National Fund as part of the funding picture, and Charles's charitable world has previously faced scrutiny over donations from Gulf sources, including the well-known cash-in bags controversy involving his charitable foundation. The Charity Commission found no wrongdoing in relation to that matter, and that must be acknowledged. But an absence of legal wrongdoing does not erase the political and reputational question. Should the future, and now current, king have allowed himself to be repeatedly surrounded by money and institutions linked to foreign states with their own strategic interests? That is the concern critics are raising. For Charles's defenders, the answer may be that this is overblown. They would say the king visited a British mosque, not Erdogan.
Time and time again, we see King Charles, I would argue, almost actively trying to destroy the monarchy. And all of the time this is happening, it is putting Prince William in a pressure cooker. I have been told by an incredibly well-positioned source that Prince William is very much feeling the anxiety. You know, you only have to open a social media account or open the news to see.
They would say the building serves local people, promotes environmental design, and works with other faiths. They would say the monarch must be a unifying figure in a diverse country, and that refusing to visit a mosque because some donors were international would send the wrong message. They might also argue that the late Queen herself engaged across faith lines, and that Charles is continuing a tradition rather than betraying it. Those points deserve to be heard. But the response from critics is that unity cannot mean selective blindness. If the palace would carefully assess the reputational risk of a charity, a donor, a campaign, or a celebrity, then it should apply the same discipline to religious and interfaith engagements. The king can respect British Muslims without appearing to validate foreign state influence. He can admire sustainable architecture without ignoring who paid for it. He can promote cohesion without making his constitutional position seem vague. The monarchy survives through symbolism, and symbolism is precisely what is being contested here. This is why the story matters beyond Cambridge. It touches the future of the crown, the relationship between monarchy and faith, and the public's willingness to trust palace judgment. If people believe Charles is using his reign to advance personal convictions at the expense of constitutional clarity, resentment will grow. If people believe the royal press is unwilling to ask basic questions, they will turn to independent commentators. If people believe William is being left to repair a weakened institution, they will begin watching him not only as Prince of Wales, but as the monarchy's emergency reserve. That is a heavy burden, and it is one Charles's decisions can either ease or intensify. The challenge for William when his time comes will be to show respect without confusion. He will need to reassure Christians that the oath still means something, reassure other faith communities that they are valued citizens, and reassure the wider public that the crown is not for sale to any foreign influence, ideological project, or fashionable cause. That will require more than attractive speeches. It will require disciplined choices about patronage, funding, meetings, public messaging, and the people allowed near the institution. The monarchy cannot afford avoidable ambiguity. In the end, King Charles's Cambridge mosque visit is not only about one building or one day. It is about whether the palace understands the world in which royal symbolism now operates.
That are still praying for him have to wake up and go, there is something seriously off here, and I cannot defend the man that is supposed to be the defender of the faith anymore. I pray to God that William is strong enough to do a complete U-turn, that William is strong enough to do what I asked our current king in my letter. Listen to your people who are looking for leadership and looking for...
The modern public can search funding pages, opening ceremonies, donor histories, think tank reports, and foreign policy records within minutes. A story that might once have remained a soft community engagement can now become a much larger debate about influence and trust. The palace may prefer the simple version: a king, a mosque, an eco-friendly building, and a message of harmony. But the public is entitled to the fuller version: who funded it, who opened it, what political associations surround it, and whether the monarch's presence was wise. That is the story the mainstream coverage largely missed. Not because the mosque itself should be condemned, and not because interfaith engagement is automatically wrong, but because the crown is too important to be treated casually. The king is not merely a visitor with personal hobbies and private enthusiasms. He is defender of the faith, head of state, and custodian of an institution that depends on public trust. If he appears to blur those lines, people will ask questions. If the palace refuses to answer them, people will ask louder. And if William is expected one day to inherit a stable crown, then the work of protecting that crown has to begin now, with honesty, restraint, and a willingness to look beyond the pleasant headline